All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our next installment of SSMF at Home. This is John Kilkenny. I'm the director of the Sewanee Music Festival, and I'm here today with a good friend, wonderful teacher and colleague, Dr. Angela Ammerman. Hi, Angela. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I want to just take a second. I'm not wonderful at reading people's bios. I always prefer that folks introduce themselves, but I just want to just do this a little bit because there's a Washington Post quote in the first sentence of your bio, which is just like super cool. So, and then of course I have to ask you the context of that. But Angela Ammerman, referred to as the first music teacher prodigy by the Washington Post, is a passionate and innovative music educator and consultant. Dr. Ammerman was hired in 2017 as the Director of Music Education and Orchestras at the University of Tennessee at Martin, where she has built or had built a robust program of dedicated music educators. And we'll talk about your work at UT today. You've also been recognized as Outstanding Advisor of the Year. You've won Teacher of the Year awards. And you and I first met when you were working in Fairfax County, but you're also, I believe, the first recipient of a PhD in music education from George Mason. So I have to make sure I get our Mason plug in there and that other connection. But you have an incredible teaching career already, and just so many things that you're doing. And we're going to talk all about music education and the work that you do with teachers and in the classroom, and the work you've done internationally. You've got a podcast, hashtag musicedlove, which is scrolling across the bottom here, and all the great things that you do. So in order to organize this in a way that's going to make sense for me anyway, the question I usually ask folks that come on this Sewanee series is to tell us a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you start with this? Where did you start instrumentally, and what led you into the teacher universe?
Sure. Well, it's really exciting, and actually, my journey is part of the Washington Post music teacher prodigy quote. Actually, because I started teaching music when I was in middle school, and in fact, before then, I was actually lining up all of my dolls, teaching them to sing. I knew that I wanted to be a music teacher from before I can remember, to tell you the truth. I don't remember wanting to be anything else except Mrs. Claus, because she brings cookies and joy. And so the only other things in my life I ever wanted to do were, either teach music or be Mrs. Claus, and that's pretty much it. But, when I was growing up, my mom was a piano teacher, and so every evening I just would hear her teaching students in our upstairs level of our house. And my mom is a great teacher, and extremely very natural teacher, very, very encouraging. And she would do more than just teach piano lessons. Like, for our recitals, we all had to get together and perform a song as, all these little kids. We had props, and we had accompaniment. It was a lot. And so she really believed very strongly in teaching the whole child. And she did that exceptionally well. One of the other things my mom did that really set up my own mindset was she would teach kids for free all the time. And she just really wanted to make sure that the kids in the neighborhood, if they wanted to teach or they wanted to take piano lessons, that they could. And as a kid, I never, ever thought about that. I just didn't think about that. I just kind of thought that was the way it was. But looking back now, I realize that has really shaped so much of who I am today, getting to watch my mom do that and getting to watch the kind of impact she had on our community as a piano teacher. When I was in middle school, I really wanted to take private violin lessons. I had already played piano because my mom was a piano teacher. And then I had started violin in fourth grade with Mrs. Hughes at my elementary school. And honestly, I think I started violin more than anything because I loved my music teacher so much. And fourth grade strings was the first opportunity to take another class with her. And I was like, man, let's do this. I couldn't wait to get to have another class with her. And I loved music. I mean, there's no question about that. And so I started on violin. And my family didn't ever have a lot of money, so they kind of had to figure things out to rent me the starter violin in fourth grade. And that kind of has been a theme throughout a lot of my childhood, is not having a lot of money to afford the things that we want, but figuring out an alternative path. And that was just huge. So, for example, in middle school, I told my music teacher, I really want private lessons. Everybody else has private lessons, and I want private lessons. I want to be a good violinist, and I want to be a good music teacher, and I know to get there, I need private lessons. And she said, well, I don't have anybody that could teach you for free right now, but why don't you start teaching the elementary kids in your neighborhood violin? And then, that's like practice for your
Wow.
future career. And so I did. I started teaching violin lessons probably in 7th or 8th grade to the kids in my neighborhood. And that was just huge. It brought so much joy to me and so much confidence. Like, teaching music is it is so much of who I am, but also, like, I have learned so much by teaching people about music. And I know that sounds odd, but the more that you teach, the more that you get to know your subject, whatever that subject may be. So starting off as a teacher in middle school was just huge for me.
That's I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's just like a great. I mean, there's so many things in there that I want to just kind of reinforce real quick. And we we have a lot of students that will watch this, and folks that will process, will be able to enjoy this. A lot of our teachers that are part of the Sewanee community, and just this idea of the value of that early childhood experience. I mean, that's just so incredibly important. And we could talk about early childhood music and all of that, but there's that connectivity that you had with your teacher at an early age. And of course, your mom, you're the second person I've had on this video series in just the last week that's talked about a parent influence. We had Natasha Farney on a couple days ago, and she talked about, great cellist, great friend and colleague, and she talked about her mom, and her mom was a teacher and a flute teacher, and just that she had a whole continuo. She wanted to start, so Natasha started playing cello so she'd have other folks for her students to play with. So just that parental influence, which is so incredibly important in every aspect of a child's life, obviously, but certainly in terms of their music education, but also that teacher and that first teacher experience, and how much that shapes who we are. And I know for me, and I have not done research on this. This is your area, so I'm looking forward to hearing it. But I certainly have read and heard a bit anecdotally that no matter how much we study, no matter how far we go in our education, that we teach like we were taught by our first teachers, or heavily influenced by it, right? So I think that's something that's oftentimes overlooked, is how important that first, or the first couple of teachers that a young musician has, not into whether they're going to become a performer or become but just how they're going to engage with music for the rest of their life. It's that early experience. And so I know that's a big part of your mission as an educator, and I want to make sure we get to that. But it's a great story. So you're teaching now. So let's get back to your story. Enough about me. So you're teaching you're teaching as a middle school student, younger student, so that you can take private lessons. All right, good, got it.
Yeah. And you're so right about the parental influence. The parental influence and my teachers in elementary and middle school and high school, they are the 3 most important role models in my life. There's no question about that. Because every step along the way, I would look back to see how they handled both musical and social situations, and I would take my cues from them, because I did respect them so much, and I truly loved all 3 of them. And in fact, even when I went into high school, again, I was one of those kids that, like, I knew I wanted to be a music teacher, and a lot of our research actually does show that kids decide they want to major in music in middle school. That's remarkable, because most other majors, they don't decide until they're like halfway through college, right? So music is just such a different subject compared to so many others that our students, they really do know at an early age. And so if we have teachers and parents and role models that can kind of continue to support them, it's going to be huge. And I have to say, for me, had I not had those supportive roles in my life, I have no idea where I would be, because in high school, you have to have a private teacher and in order to go to college. And in middle school, I didn't actually get private lessons myself. I just couldn't. But I did teach them. And because I was teaching them for free, I wasn't making the money to afford the private lessons, but I was able to learn a lot. By the time I was in high school, I had a piano teacher that allowed me to clean his house for him in exchange for lessons, which is just incredible. And so that's kind of what I did. And then eventually, I don't think I cleaned his house anymore. I think eventually he just gave them to me for free, if I remember correctly. But
Wow.
In order for me to get ready for college auditions, I needed that. One other really amazing part of my journey is that in high school, along with knowing that I needed to take piano lessons, I knew that I needed to do camps. I knew the value of a summer music festival. I saw my friends and my classmates and the other students in the youth symphony all growing drastically every summer, whereas I felt like I was not. And I didn't know how to get the kind of growth that they received. And, they would talk over and over and over about the value of these summer camps and these music festivals and these different opportunities that they participated in. And I knew there was no way my family could afford it. And I wasn't as good of a performer as them. By that time, I felt I was behind already, to be honest, because they were doing all of these things this whole time. So again, I went and approached my teacher, and she said, "Oh, you don't need those summer camps. You need to be a counselor at a summer camp." And I said, "What?" And I was like, who in the world is going to hire a high school kid to go, work with these kids to teach music at a summer camp? And she said, "I know just the place." And it was an Ohio State Teachers Association. So the American String Teachers Association, the Ohio chapter, they put on a summer camp every summer for elementary and middle school kids. And they hired me, and they, because of that, each summer I got to go actually teach music to a group of string players. And I got to actually work with a really, really phenomenal music teacher, Laura Jose, who used to teach at Baldwin Wallace Conservatory. And again, these events and these opportunities were like the most formative for me as a musician, because I continued to build this identity of myself as a music teacher before I even set foot onto a college campus. And this was just really incredible for me. I found that I loved it. I found that I was good at it, which is really key. And I knew that because
certainly helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. The students' responses, and students will let you know. They will, whether they say it or not. They're going to let you know if you're doing a good job. But B, because, Laura Jose and the other teachers at this camp just really lifted me up and kind of were there to guide me, so that by the time I went to college as a music ed major, I had more experience than anybody I knew. And all of my professors, they really seemed to appreciate that and take note of that, which was just tremendous. But
that's awesome. I mean, all of that is awesome. So I to try to go back to any of that, but definitely. And again, I think, I want to say this as clear as I can. I deliberately try not to plan these discussions too much when we have some really broad topics with everybody we have on, and then it would just kind of say, let's talk, because I think that's certainly it's more interesting for me when I tune in to check out, podcasts or videos than some sort of overly scripted experience. But since you brought up summer programs, I do want to mention, obviously we're on here for Sewanee, and this is on all our channels, but the value of working in the summer is it really can't be understated, and the opportunity to do that, the networks you create. I mean, I was a student at Sewanee. I also went to other places after that, and had wonderful experiences there. So I think it's so important to mention that, not just because of the networking and the professional connectivity and the chance to work with different teachers, but also just the idea that you can focus, really hone in on your craft and whatever that happens to be. Chamber music or orchestra, or if you want to be a teacher, if you're a counselor at a program, and you're really able to focus in on what you're doing in a way that no matter how great of an institution you attend during the year, you can't do. There's just too many other things going on, and you're also living your life differently in a summer program. I mean, Sewanee is a special place in part because of where it is. It's a big part of it is the location and the ability to sort of tune out the world, which is really nice to try to do now, especially, and I think for the next few weeks, especially. But so that I appreciate you bringing that up, and I know we're going to take a minute in a few minutes and talk about the different things that we're doing in the summer, but. So here you are, you're in college, yeah, and you want to be a teacher, and I got it. I hear you. That's great. And what you did take a hiatus between degrees though before getting your PhD, and you were teaching for several years, well, maybe not several years, but a few years before your PhD. Could you talk a little bit about your experience in Fairfax County and how that all worked?
absolutely. Yeah. And for anybody listening that is a music educator or is pursuing a degree in music education, I actually highly recommend taking time after your bachelor's degree to just get experience. One of the things that's really nice about a summer music festival is that as a performer and as a musician, you're being immersed in music. As a music teacher, you don't have many of those opportunities until you graduate college, and usually those opportunities actually come from being in the classroom. So for any music education majors out there, I highly recommend teaching for at least 2 years before you go on to pursue a master's degree. And then after that master's degree, take another 2 years to teach, to apply what you have learned and actually like immerse yourself again in that same situation. It maybe not the same situation. You can go to a different school, but so that you can apply all of the different things that you've learned, and you can become a better and better teacher as you continue to pursue degrees. I did teach in Fairfax County schools for 7 years. And it was funny, when I first moved to Northern Virginia, my husband was in the military at that time. And so I didn't have a choice of moving. You have to go. And that was fine. But when I found out we were going to be in kind of Northern Virginia, I immediately said, I have to teach in Fairfax County. It is the best county in the entire country. In my music ed textbooks in undergrad, we actually read all of these different scenarios about highly successful music programs. And anytime it said the county they were from, it was Fairfax County.
That's amazing. I didn't know we made textbooks. I'm a product of Fairfax County music program, so I still take a lot of pride in that, and I'm glad that we made it into the text. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, Fairfax County does produce phenomenal musicians. And not only that, but Fairfax County just has this really great philosophy about teaching music, that focuses again on the whole child. And whether you want to be a music major or you just want to love music your whole life, Fairfax County has just an incredible array of opportunities, and they hire the best teachers. So I remember when I went to interview for the job in Fairfax County, I brought a portfolio with me of like the things that my students did and the numbers that I had in my past job. And I had more than doubled the program at my past job in both a high school and a middle school within 3 years. So I like showed the numbers and I showed what I did, and I brought those to my interview. And I'll never forget Jennifer Himes. She said to me, okay, so we're hiring you right then and there at the interview. And she was like, I don't know where we're putting you, but we want you in Fairfax County. And I thought, all of my dreams have now come true. I am a teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools. I'm a music teacher, and I get to do this. And it was incredible. So I taught for 2 years at Robinson Secondary School with Ann Rupert, who is a phenomenal orchestra director and a great mentor to me. And then after that, I went to Annandale High School, where I was at one school. And for anybody that is a music teacher now, or maybe you have lots of experiences with music teachers, particularly string teachers, we're very rarely at just one school. It is truly a luxury. And at Annandale High School, I was going to be teaching 4 orchestra classes and then 1 international baccalaureate music. And it was just a dream job for me for a number of reasons. 1, it's in Fairfax County, which is where I wanted to be. 2, it's a school with the resources of a wealthy county like Fairfax County, but it is a very poor school in that very low income. So I got to work with the kids from a low income community, highly diverse, but I had the resources of a wealthy county so that I could get the kids whatever they needed. And that was just a dream job. In fact, leaving that job was the hardest job I've ever had to leave. It was one of the hardest things I ever did, because I felt, you become so much of a family with your students. And
Well, and I was sort of, if people saw me turning away for watching this, I was frantically writing things down here that I want to make sure we talk about. No, this is great. So I want to talk about recruiting and program development, because you just sort of casually dropped in this. I doubled the size of the program where I was before, and recruiting is something that I do a lot, and we've talked about in other places, and I want to make sure we talk about recruiting. And I know that we first met I think at Annandale. I think you had invited me to do a college night there, and just what you were able to do with the students there, and what you were able to bring in, and the culture you created it was really something that was inspiring to me, and I know inspiring to others that were there. And I want you to talk a little bit about so program development, recruiting, and sort of culture building when it comes to an organization, when it comes to a program like yours, and however, how do you teach that? Because I think recruiting, and I'm answering my own question. I'm sorry, I hate when I do that. Recruiting is really hard to teach. I think there's so much of a so much that's naturally people can naturally do it or not do it. I mean, you and I can both talk to a wall for an hour, probably. so at any rate, talk to us about recruiting and program development, and see what you can, how you can do that. All right.
Absolutely. So recruiting, it's something that to all music teachers, it should be an essential component to your job. And recruiting happens every single day, whether you realize it or not. Your students every day are thinking, do I love this or don't I love this? And if they love this, they're going to continue coming back. If they don't love it, they're leaving you. And so every single day, your students are either enjoying your class or they're hating your class. And enjoying your class means a variety of different things. One of which is the teacher likable? And I actually did a study on this, on why students quit after fourth grade strings. And one of the biggest, most significant factors was whether or not they felt the teacher was likable. Another factor was whether they felt like they belonged, whether they felt like they had friends in orchestra. And then another one is whether they think they're good at their instrument. Those are the three main factors as far as why these kids were either staying in orchestra or dropping after just 1 year. What really amazed me was the amount of students that would say they thought they stunk at the violin after playing for 1 year in fourth grade orchestra, where like they might have seen their teacher once a week at the most. Who was telling them that they stunk? And why aren't we lifting them up more? Because let's be honest, a beginning string player kind of sounds like a dying cow. We all do. It's rough. I think that the key to keeping those kids and to building them up is not to lie to them because they sound rough. They're going to sound rough when they start. Right. It's to be really honest about that and to let them know that this is expected. It will continue to get better and better and better. And as they make those minor improvements, to make a big deal out of those. And that leads right into teacher likability, because when the teacher, always sees what the students are improving upon, recognizes that, and capitalizes on that, then the students are like, oh, I am good. I got something good here, and I'm going to continue practicing because I'm good. And then they feel like they belong in the class because they're good. And then they have friends in class because they feel like they belong. So like one leads right into the other. And we as the teacher, we are the number one factor as to whether or not a kid is going to stay in our program.
Absolutely. Well, and there's, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, there's just, in another conversation I had this summer, I was talking with another group of folks about, some of the challenges we face more broadly with music and the lack of diversity in classical music in terms of our programming and in terms of people who are participating and engaging. And I mean, all of these things. So I want to stay on this idea of recruiting for a moment and just say that when we were having this other discussion, so much of music and the way that we have structured music is to exclude, right? You have to take an audition and you're excluded, you don't make district band or district orchestra or all state and there are these sort of gradual filtering. And fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with that as long as we're honest about what that is and understand that we could hold, I think, and I want your thoughts on this, that we could hold two thoughts at the same time. There's a place for everybody in music, but music can also be something that, depending on what you want to do with it, has to be by its nature gradually more exclusionary of quality and nothing else, right? Certainly not of gender or race, or I don't mean anything like that, but of quality of performance. But that's certainly different than a job of teaching in a public school setting when it's an elective. And you could even make the argument in the collegiate setting that we want to be more open to students participating in music beyond our music majors. So take that and run with it however you'd like.
Yeah, I actually call this from going from elite to extinct. And I believe that in the public schools, we do this to ourselves. And I actually think one of the obstacles that many music teachers have to overcome is that many music teachers were performance majors, as undergrads. And when you are a performance major, you do naturally have a mindset of, I have to be the best. And you do. There's no doubt about that. What is really difficult for many is to shift that mindset of my students have to be the best in order to keep, in this class. And I don't think that anybody ever says this outright. I've never heard a teacher say, you have to be the best in order to continue in my program. I've never heard that. But there's no doubt about that mindset being prevalent across all disciplines within music education, and that being a concern, and that also being a factor in going extinct. And to be honest, in the string music education world, I have a very real concern about programs that are disappearing across the country. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that elite mindset, which does not belong in the public schools unless you have like 5 ensembles and you
Right.
have that elite mindset for one group.
Right.
That's actually really great, right? If you've got one group where you've got different levels and those students are the best of the best of the best. But that mindset as a public school teacher, it can't be there. And exactly like you said, John, like we need that in the professional world or else we're not going to be any good. We have to have that mindset.
Right. Right.
But in the public school system, we really have to revamp our thinking. And especially for those of us from a more performance background, we have to be careful that whether we're saying it or not, our students aren't thinking that way, thinking that we believe that.
Well, and there's something really important too about access points and how students connect with music in whatever way they access it. And this is something that will sort of awkwardly bring us into your international work, although I didn't intend it that way. But this, and actually, I want to make sure we talk about Thailand. But this sense of, for programs and for recruiting, I'm going to guess that when you doubled the size of that program and when you did the same or similar things at Annandale, that you created multiple access points for students to connect with your program. And this is something we've talked about at SWANee. It's why we started the academy programs there with SWANee, including your string academy. It's why, you see programs that are successful. They're successful because they have so many different ways. And it might just be that you do the academy or the beginning band or the, chamber orchestra, whatever the early access points are. But that allows someone to engage in music. And I mean, I run into people so many times, especially patrons, and I do a lot of donor engagement now for SWANee especially. And I run into people who say, oh, I played that instrument in whatever grade and I just wasn't good enough anymore, so I quit. And it's just, I'm glad that they still want to support us and they come to our concerts and they're part of our team in that way. But it just kind of breaks my heart a little bit to think that. Or I talk to incoming freshmen at the collegiate level and they say, well, I'm so tired from being, I want to say this as carefully as I can. I've done so much with music as a high school student that I just don't want to be involved. I don't want to do that again because they think of, and I'm going to pick on my band friends here a little bit. They think of band as this intense thing that starts 3 weeks before school and goes until a week after graduation. And they just are afraid to, and they don't realize that there's a whole world of music that they could do at the collegiate level. That's quality. The experience is quality, but it's not going to take up their entire life. It's not going to consume their lives in the way that some programs, quite honestly, can. So I'm sure you have some views on that and how educators who are out there trying to figure out how to get students to connect with their programs, how can they do that? So how can they do that? Let's focus that question a little.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there needs to be a place for everyone. And this is a huge part of my personal philosophy is that everyone has a place in music, whether you could be 80 years old and there is a place for you in music. And if you can't find one, I'm going to help you find it just because that's who I am and that's my passion. But as a public school teacher, when I first started teaching at Annandale, one of the big things was that there wasn't a beginning orchestra. There just wasn't at the high school. So if you were to be in my program, you had to have experience somewhere along the way to be in the program. You could not start as a beginner. But I feel very passionately, both as a music educator, but also as a recruiter, that there has to be a point for those students to join us. And one of the coolest things about Annandale is that there are students from all over the world that come to Annandale. Their families want a better life for them, and so they come to the best school system in the country. They often are living in very poor situations because it's so expensive, but that's where they come because education is extremely valuable to many of our immigrants here in the United States. Those students were coming in and they didn't belong anywhere because they were brand new to the United States. They didn't speak hardly any English, most of the students that I worked with, and they didn't feel like they belonged anywhere. They didn't feel like they belonged. And so what first started happening was our counselors started throwing them into my class one by one by one. Anytime a kid would come into the country, she said, "You want beginners? You got them." And so she did. She just started throwing them into my class. And so throughout an entire year, I would get new students all the time. And I don't speak any other language except English and music. So this was a big concern for me at first, but I have to tell you that beginning orchestra was one of the most enjoyable parts of teaching at Annandale, because those students, they actually felt like they belonged once they were in my program. And one of the coolest stories I have about that is this one student, Jafu. He, came in as an English language learner, and I think he was from Vietnam. And he said, later, years and years later, he was like a sophomore in high school after he'd been in the country for about 6 years. He started in 4th grade strings in Fairfax County, and he told me, he said, my stand partner was my best friend in 4th grade. And I said, "Oh, did he speak Vietnamese?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Did you speak English?" He said, "No." And I said, "How was he your best friend?" And he was like, "Because every day we sat together and we played music, and he was my best friend." And that was it. He didn't explain any further than that. That was it. We sat together every day, we played music together, and he was my best friend. Done. And hearing that from the student just really hit home for me that music is another language, and our students of all ages need this in their lives. And I'll say, as a recruiter, one big thing that I see a lot of teachers kind of missing out on is the opportunity to include beginners in a high school program fully. And what I mean by that is taking them to assessment, taking them on the field trips, taking them to recruit. Some of your beginners will be your best recruiters because they're so excited. It's new to them, right? They just got in and they are converts, and they will convert the world. I'm telling you, they will be your best recruiters if you let them take on that leadership role.
Well, and also you've cared about them. So now they care about you and your program, right? And again, not that, again, in no way am I implying you or anybody else don't care about all of your students. It's not what I'm saying. I want to be careful that I never know who watches things, and I just want to make sure that I say that. But when you have invested in someone who has up to that point not been invested in, they are definitely going to be more engaged with you than someone who is used to being paid attention to. I think that's a fair. I mean, I know there are exceptions, but I think that's a fair generalization. And so that sense of and I like how you say that, bringing them to everything, because, it's one thing to offer beginning whatever. It's another thing to say, I'm going to take all of my groups to assessment. I'm going to take all of my groups on their spring trip or Hershey Park or whatever it is, and not let my ego, get in the way of their experience. That, at the end of the day, and I said this when I was on your podcast, I want to be very careful in my position not to lecture folks that are teaching in the classroom every day, because I'm not, and I never really did that. So I don't want to sit here on my, on my high horse or whatever and pontificate. But, assessment really feels like an important thing musically, but at the end of the day, it's not the performance, the experience as much as it's the process, right? I mean, it's the process. So if the process matters to your top ensemble, it sure I almost cursed there. Sorry. It sure as heck should matter to your beginners, especially if you're going to, put them in the class and make them do this. And so I'm so glad you said that. And I'm just was great. Thank you for
Thank you.
saying all that.
No, yeah, it's hugely valuable. And like you said, like when we invest in them, they do want to invest back. And our students of all ages and all languages, they're very socially acute. They really are aware of what we're doing, and they're aware of what matters to us. And John, like you said, if assessment is a big deal to us, then it should be a big deal to all of our students. And if we're only taking our top group, then the underlying unspoken message to our students is, well, you don't matter as much.
You don't matter. Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And one of the things that I say to my music ed majors all the time is find the value in every student in your classroom, because I'll be honest, it can be really hard sometimes.
Sure. Of course. I mean, of course. And again, it's no, anytime you have this discussion, we're talking about it, even if we've lived it, post living it. And of course, and it's an abstract thing. But again, like this is, I can't complain about running a festival because I signed the contract, right? I mean, I can't complain about teaching percussion or conducting the symphonic band or whatever I'm conducting at Mason because I signed the contract, right? I didn't have to sign the contract, and everybody knows what you're getting into when you do this, and that I think as we go forward post or whatever, I don't even know if it's going to be post COVID or hand in hand with COVID or whatever this is going to be, but the value of every student and every ensemble is going to matter more, and redefining what success means, even in terms of recruiting. I had this discussion with somebody else, that this idea of we've lived in music in this bigger is better world for so long. I have more students, I have more trophies, I have more whatever. And now we're facing a situation where we may not have that. We may have smaller ensembles. And how do you change that conversation with students that, and I sort of drives me crazy. Well, I have 500 people in my high school band, but none of them could read music and they only know three scales. And so I don't particularly care how many students you have in your band. So it's about numbers, but it's also about the experience that they have and the connectivity that they have through your program. I think that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, and you said about they can't they don't know their scales, they're not performing well. This is one key component to recruiting as well. As much as I say that the performance is not as important, it is still important.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the end all be all, but your students must feel successful after a performance. And this is a really key component to getting them to continue and getting them to feel like they're good. If every time you walk off stage, the students feel dejected, you've got an issue. If every time you go to assessment, you get goods and poors, you've got an issue. Right. I'm sorry. So
and it's not the kids. It's not the students.
No, never. As an assessment judge, I feel horrible giving out bad scores, because most of the time, if it's a good or a poor, it's the teacher. I would say every teacher has sometimes where you have a flop. Yeah. If it's every time. Yeah, me too. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
All experience of that. But if it's every time, you're going to lose students. And that's the reality. So.
Before we leave this, you mentioned assessment a few times. I'm assuming it's similar in string world. I've done a little bit of adjudicating in strings. I've done much more in wind band. The two things I hear most often is you could tell when the bell rings, right? You could tell in a rehearsal. And we're not going to talk about this today, but like the rehearsal structure is so important, right? Like how you manage the rehearsal. And boy, you could tell when the bell rings, because the piece sounds great for the first 23 minutes or however long their class is. But you could just tell where they stopped every time. So, the rehearsing and managing the schedule. And then also, like, because you play, I came from a really terrific high school band. I went to Madison High School. Jeff Bianchi was my band director. If you're a band person, these are names that and you've heard of these programs. There was nothing that I played in high school that I could have possibly done with my first high school teaching job if I had one. No way. There's repertoire we played that I couldn't play with college ensembles, for at least not initially. And that's such a huge trap that early teachers fall into, is this programming what they played. I played the blah, blah, blah with my, and maybe I was in the second band in college. Well, the second band at, most universities is going to be better than the band you in your first teaching job. So any real quick thoughts on that in terms of rehearsals or assessment before we go on to Thailand?
Absolutely. Well, one, for rehearsals, I would say you have to have a structure that your students all know. And within that structure, you always have to be thinking, when is our next deadline for whatever it may be, our recording or our performance or our assessment? When is that deadline? And you have to be really good about your time management. I would say that I could go on and on about rehearsal schedules, but that'll do for that. And in terms of literature selection, I made the same mistakes. Like my first year of teaching, I was like, oh, these kids are so good. They're so motivated. I'm going to get them a hard piece. And man, that was so hard for me and for the students. And it is not always the best thing to do, because you have to remember they need to feel successful. They also need to feel challenged. So it's about finding that middle ground. And sometimes it just takes time. Sometimes the best thing you can do is reach out to other teachers for their advice, because they have great advice. And then to look at past programs that the school has done, and what have they performed successfully. I would pick something along those lines for your first year. Once you get to know the students and what they're going to give you, then you can kind of go from there. But a lot of the times the kids will think, I can do this, and they can do it, but a million things are going on in their lives. And so often they don't always have the time to dedicate to really perfecting these pieces the way we might, because we're music majors. This was the number one thing in our lives.
Right.
All students, very few of them will be like that. And that's good, because we don't need a million performers in the world, and we don't need a million music teachers. We need the ones that really love it.
Yes, all of that. Yes. And while we could sit here and stay on this topic, and, maybe we'll have to do another one where we just talk about assessment. I wanted to swing to two more things before we wrap up. One of them is Thailand, and then the other one is what we have done in Sewanee and what we are planning, and we'll get into all of that. So tell me about Thailand. I have a video here too, so I'm going to work on the screen share while you talk to us about the work that you did in Thailand.
Great. Yeah. So, as you're hearing throughout my whole entire life, this whole idea of giving back to the community is really, really important to me. And the community might be where I'm living, or the community might be the globe, somewhere across the globe, to be honest with you. But the idea of giving back is huge, because for me, so many people supported me along my path to where I am, and I found great value in that. So to make a long story short, one of my friends was telling me about going to this orphanage and how he was teaching violin there, and he was really sad that he couldn't return the next year. And I said, well, why can't you return? And I don't remember why, but basically he wasn't able to, and he was really sad. And I thought, I would love to go. Immediately I thought I would love to go. And I heard myself say, well, I'll go. I'll do it. And he said, what, you'll go? And I was like, yeah, I'll go. I had no clue how to raise the money. I had no clue what I was getting into. I just said, I'll go. It's an orphanage. This has always been a part of my heart, is giving back, especially to English language learners. And so I'll go to this orphanage where I knew that the director spoke English, and teaching the kids to be ready to go off and actually have successful careers was important to her. So she was adamant about teaching them English as well, which is still prominent even in Thailand. Anyways, so after I said I would go, I started to realize that he taught violin to one student in Thailand at this orphanage. There were no violins on campus, and I had volunteered not only to go, I had already reached out to the director and was like, I want to teach everybody to play violin. And for the younger kids who aren't old enough to start violin, I want to teach them general music. I want to come in and I want to do whatever you need me to do, but I want to teach music. And she was like, great, let's do it. So then I had to figure out how to get, I think I ended up with like 45 violins of all different sizes, and then, rhythm sticks and all kinds of stuff for the kids. I think the fundraiser, we probably raised $2,500 in 2 days just by posting on social media. Wow. And that is my network. That is my friends and my colleagues believe very much in the power of music. And so they just kind of just rushed in and donated. And then a local music store in Tennessee, Amro Music, they actually donated a ton of violins of different sizes for the younger kids. And so I actually went to the airport with a trunk full of violins, and luckily one of the gentlemen at the airport actually helped me carry them in. And Delta said, you can check all of these for, I think they only charged me like $80 to check probably 20 some violins, because they were amazing. And then when I got there, the money we had raised to buy the rest of the violins, they were from a Thai luthier in the area in Chiang Mai. And so he actually came, and he was a huge part of our success as well, because on the first day, he just sat there watching the whole time as I taught the kids to play violin the very first day. And he made a recording of it, which was awesome. And then he actually would help us tune. He came and fixed strings, and he helped the whole entire time I was there, which is amazing. But so my inspiration to go was kind of, I believe that these kids deserve a music education just as much as anyone else. And I went, and it was incredible. It was the most life-changing thing I've ever done. I'll never forget that first day when I was there and the kids came. They were super late. Actually, the first day they were super early. The rest of the days they were late, but the first day they were super early. And I had all the violins lined up, and they were all in their cases. And, these children didn't speak English. So I have a whole system I was using with them, mainly with modeling. And so I said, okay, open your cases. And I started to show them how to open their cases. And I said, take out the violin. And I was showing them how to take out the violin. And they all just sat there staring at these cases, and they didn't want to touch the violins. And finally, one of the teachers there, she said to me, a violin is for a rich man. They're afraid to touch it. And they were like, they're afraid that they might break it. And so I said, well, it's okay. And I kept smiling lots and, handing them violins. And then, after that process became easier and easier. But I taught them primarily by modeling, and then by a system of sound effects a lot of the time, because sound effects and keywords. So John, if you don't mind playing the video, this is how I would teach bow hold for students that don't speak English. And this is actually from the orphanage in Chiang Mai.
Practice position.
Practice position.
Hi.
Hi.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding.
Bravo. Katai.
Katai.
No.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Katai. Ooh. Yeah. Bravo. Down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow, down bow. Soup, 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 soup. Other way. Soup, soup, soup. Bing bong, bing bong, bing bong, bing bong, bing bong. Practice position.
Practice position.
Bravo. Turn this way.
Okay, so this is, you can just get a little glimpse of kind of what we did there in Thailand, and the sound effects that I used. All of the sound effects I actually heard the kids use in different settings, and I would actually make note of what I heard them do. And I learned what a rabbit is. So katai is rabbit, and
okay.
so that's what that katai was. And then you notice for violinists watching, I know my wrist was like crazy up in the air. That was just because I didn't have anything to stand on to show them. But so, and then also you may have noticed that I was playing with my left hand. I was holding my pencil with my left hand instead of my right, only so that they were modeling, and I didn't have to go through that whole discussion of left hand versus right hand. And just in case you're kind of curious about all of that. But so that's the way I taught. Everything was like that, and it was so much fun. And the kids just ate it up, as you can see. And by the end of 10 days, they were playing a very modified version of Canon in D. They were playing, so the advanced students actually were playing like a more advanced part, and then the younger students were playing open strings, and then they played some other beginning pieces of music, and they actually put on a whole concert by the end for the Chiang Mai community. There was like a big festival, and they put on a concert, and we still have the violins are all at the orphanage still, and I actually have students that from University of Tennessee at Martin who have gone back to work with the kids each summer. And we're working on raising enough money to hire a full-time music teacher at the orphanage so that when we return to help them, there will be somebody there that's like consistent. And then each summer, one of us can kind of put on like a summer camp, an intensive violin camp.
It's just amazing. I mean, that's an incredible story. And I kind of want to just sit with that for a second, or just to see that work and to know, I mean, I've done, some teaching overseas in other languages, and it's so, I mean, I don't speak any other language other than English either, but it definitely is an example for anyone watching. You ever want to be humbled, try to teach in another language, and I had a translator show up for one of 6 or 7 classes I was doing in Costa Rica, and they came for one, and then after that they were like, well, you need to learn how to speak Spanish, so they left. And for the rest of the week I had to teach, yeah, and great, thankfully there were enough English students that spoke some English that I could kind of fake it. But that was awesome to watch, and it's such a great project, and I hope to hear more about it. So we've been talking for almost an hour, and I haven't mentioned SSWANee at all, which is terrible for me as the director of SSWANee, but I really did want to have you on today to talk about the work that you're doing, because it's important to me to showcase that and to showcase the work of our faculty. And so in the summer of 2019, I approached you about putting together a string academy. This is, again, to talk about access points. SSWANee has been, for many years, a program that, even for younger students who are investing, 4 weeks in a summer program to travel and, many thousands of dollars to come there. And I thought what is important for us is we're trying to both expand our recruiting opportunities for the festival, but also to help the University of the South, our host institution, expand their recruiting, that we start programs for both younger students and also for students who, for whatever reason, aren't able to join us for the whole 4-week program. And I knew your work from Annandale and from George Mason and then at UT. So we started a string academy, and I had no idea how it would work, and it was incredible. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we had more students registered for the 2020 String Academy than we had attend the 2019 Academy, prior to having to cancel everything because of COVID, or transition everything, I should say. So tell us a little bit about what you did in 2019 and then I also wanted to talk about kind of what we're looking at for some music educators, because we're definitely going to lean into helping our music education community a bit more at the festival. So we could chat about that. We haven't really figured it out yet, but we could always talk about it anyway. But with the String Academy, like, how did you structure that? How did you think about that? And what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, the String Academy is so exciting because I had never done anything quite like it. And, earlier you were talking about access points and the importance of having various access points. And our String Academy was exactly that. It's an access point for younger string students who maybe are a little, sometimes less experienced, perhaps. They're just younger in general, to be part of the Summer Music Festival. And what was really neat is that we actually had a really great collaboration with the Cumberland Orchestra with Gene Moon, and I'll talk about that in a second, but so that the students could see kind of the older kids and what they were doing in the orchestra. But so with the String Academy, we basically had a 2-week summer camp for mostly middle school students. I think we had one that was like maybe 5th grade going into 6th grade, but they were mostly middle school students. They were pretty advanced, a lot of them, and we did have some variety in terms of level. So we did write a few separate parts for some of those kids to make it a little bit more successful for everyone. And then we just had rehearsals every day. They were immersed in music and in music learning. They were rehearsing with me, then they had sectionals, then they had private lessons, and then they got to eat lunch together, which I think is their favorite thing in the whole entire world, because they got to go to a cafeteria, which is so exciting, a cafeteria on campus. What? They loved it. Oh my gosh. And as with everything, like the key elements to my teaching are primarily instilling this sense of belonging in all of the students. And I think we did that really well, both in terms of a sense of belonging to the String Academy, but also to the music festival overall. And belonging to the music festival overall, that was because of John. It was because of Gene Moon with the Cumberland Orchestra, and because of the kids in his group. And I'll tell you, one of the most beautiful moments of the whole entire camp was when Gene said that we could absolutely have the String Academy middle school kids perform on stage at the end of our 2-week period with his kids, high school kids, and some college kids even. And not only did he say that, but when we arrived for the first rehearsal, there was an empty seat in the second chair section of each section. And they invited the String Academy students to sit in the very first row with the concertmaster and the section leaders. They did not expect the kids to be as good as them, and the kids had most of them did have like revised parts so that it wasn't as stressful as what the Cumberland kids were playing. But that experience for those students was by far the best experience of the whole entire week, because we just kind of kept leveling up the whole entire 2-week period. We gave them some music, and we had a concert after the first week. Then we gave them harder music. Then we had, a little mini concert, and then they got to play with the big kids. And like, that experience was so important that I know you got some emails about all these kids that are like, I want to do real Swanee next year. Like they wanted to be completely immersed. And that was a huge motivator for them to work their butts off so that they could successfully audition and they could go from the String Academy to the music festival. And this is really, really huge. Like part of me at first was like, oh, I'm so sad I won't have them next year. And then the other part of me was like, man, they're crushing it. They're going to be part of the real music festival, Not that we weren't the real music festival.
No, of course, yeah.
It's a younger group, and
right.
So it's different. And looking back, I'm amazed by how inviting all of the students at the music festival were to the kids, because they were younger. They're middle school kids. It is different. And even if their ability is quite high for middle school students, especially, they're still not going to be at that same maturity level as the high school and college students. And I was just amazed at how they took them under their wing and said, come with me, let's do this. You're going to be great. And there was not a single moment where those kids felt like they were, not as good. I think the whole time they were just motivated to be one of their role models in the future. And that was really incredible.
Well, it was awesome to see. I went to, you talk about, I don't know, we were talking about recruiting, we were talking about all these things. Like, I think my role as director is to go to everything. I just go to stuff now. I don't get to play as much as I used to, which is sad in a different way, but I go to everything now. And so I went to, all the String Academy, the performances that you did, and to see their excitement, and to see, to build, it's one thing to build a relationship with a student in a semester or in a quarter or, over this course of several years in a music program. But to see the relationships that you were able to build with these students in a week, or 2 weeks, and the way that they not only kind of bonded with you and the other academy, faculty, but really bonded with you and also bonded with each other. They were sort of this little traveling pack of little string players. And you could see them coming to the cafeteria, and you could see them on their way. And it was just this really charming element, but also like, it's fun to joke about it, but also really important to me to as we grow that, because it's going to be what feeds the festival. It's going to be what helps bring students to the university, and that's important. I want people to be able to access what we do at Sewanee, and they got to go to all the concerts, they got to go to all the, faculty performances, they got to go to all the student chamber concerts. So they really got to see what's out there and learn. And I know from my experience at Sewanee as a student, that Sewanee taught me what it meant to be a musician, more than anything else, and to see that and to see that level. And I wasn't in middle school. but I was pretty early high school when I went to Sewanee. So I wasn't that much older than the String Academy kids. And they just found a video actually of like an 8-second video of me playing back when I was a student there, which I'm trying to destroy. But
I want to see that.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone on that one. But anyway, it was awesome to watch you work. It was inspiring to watch you work with the students. And I know that we're going to, look to the future first for our academy programs. Our summer is a little uncertain still, so I don't want to get out ahead of anybody. But we're also looking at some music education programs, and we're going to work with different organizations in Tennessee and across the country to build what I hope to be a really exciting and innovative is a word that's overused, but exciting and different kind of music education experience for students that are in school or early career teachers, so that they could also engage with the music festival. I mean, I think it's important when you're teaching to have something that can inspire you beyond the work that you're doing, and so to be able to have a whole campus full of music educators with us in the summer that can go to faculty concerts and that can attend student performances and can work with you and the team that you're going to assemble. It's super exciting to me. So I don't know when we're going to do that, but we're going to do it. I've definitely committed that we're going to do it. So,
well, and that's one of the most exciting things. I don't know any other music festival that does something quite like this, and I'm just so honored to be part of it, and I'm so grateful to have a director like you that has that vision and wants to continue to grow in that way. So, just really, really exciting.
Angela, this has been great, and I've taken probably a little more of your time than I thought I would, but this has been wonderful to talk to you. For all of our folks that are watching, if you've been seeing the scroll for a while now, hashtag musicedlove is your podcast, and you have a lot of guests on there. You just had recently someone who talks too much. That would be me on your podcast, so I was really honored to be there. But for folks that are in the music education field, really for any musician, but certainly for folks in the music ed field, subscribe to it, check it out. You have some great guests. You have some really important folks, sharing information about teaching and classroom management and also whatever I talked about. But I really, folks will check that out. Go to your website. You're teaching at George Mason. You're consulting and working with the folks at UT Martin. You're saving the world in Thailand. You're raising a family. I mean, what are you not doing? So if folks want to reach out to you, how else besides your podcast can they find you?
They can find me at angela.ammerman@gmail.com is easy, my email address. You could also go to my website, which is just angelaammerman.com, or you can just, Google me and find a way. Luckily with technology, you can contact me just about any way. And yeah, that's great. This was so much fun to be part of. Thank you so much for having me out.
Thanks, Angela. This was great. Thanks, everybody. Take care.